to cooperate, so forgive the side view. And thank you for the introductions, Kyle, and for stepping up. Always flexible, PTA flexible, and
Always
jumping in
PTA
to say yes.
flexible. Yeah, so I just have hit the record button. So I just want to thank again Fidelis Care being our fantastic partner in this initiative. Dr. Moreno, Dr. Reeves, Amy, and Dr. DeGame. Lots of doctors tonight. Dr. DeGame, I will turn moderation over to you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kyle. So I am very excited to welcome our panelists and have this discussion today that combines several professionals. We're so fortunate to have all of you here with us today to discuss a hot topic that's on so many parents and teachers' minds. And it's basically the digital age we live in and how much our children are using digital technology, and parenting in this digital age is our topic. So I can't say that most parents are comfortable with how much digital exposure their children are getting these days. But at the same time, it's a necessity and a need, especially doing virtual learning. And so our questions that we received ahead in our email all really reflect these concerns. And we're also welcoming your questions during the panel in the chat box that we'll try to monitor as well. So we'll start with a question. One of the most highly discussed and debated topics among parents today is screen time. And is there such a thing as too much screen time? We'll start with Dr. Lisa Moreno.
That's a good question, especially in these very different times and very challenging times. So yes, I do think there's too much screen time, but I think we have to have a lot of compassion now with the fact that that's largely the only alternative for many of our children, especially if they're doing fully remote classes and they're limited in terms of their interactions. Studies have shown that there are links between too much screen time and some more adverse type of concerns, such as childhood obesity, as well as some delayed development. And the main thing we want to do as parents is always keep our screen time in check with our children. You want to just be aware of what they're doing when they're on the screens. It would probably seem that they're almost always on the screen now, especially if they're doing remote classes. The key right now is, as parents, to be forgiving for yourself and recognize that these are challenging times, and to teach by example. So support activities other than screen time in the family and set some clear limits. And you want to make some screen-free playtime a daily priority, especially for the very young children.
Thank you, Dr. Moreno. And our own Amy Heisick is a teacher who's had to use the internet and the virtual world extensively in her teaching recently. Amy, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, right now is a very difficult time for monitoring screen time. So the classes that I teach right now are hybrid. So I have some students that are in person. I have some students that are at home. And I'm teaching both of them simultaneously. So I have some students in front of me and then some that are on a Zoom meeting or a Google Meet. And so the amount of screen time that our kids are getting because it's a necessity for school is a lot. What I think that we as parents need, and that's the way that school has to be, I think, right now, because the alternative is not getting the interaction with the teachers, not getting the interaction with classmates, and not getting the instructional time. And so that's not really a good alternative. I think what we as parents, and I see this with my own child, I have a 5th grader who right now is fully remote, but she's going back to school in a few weeks. But what I see is after the schoolwork is done time. And that's where, Dr. Moreno had said, make sure that there is off-screen playtime, make sure that there is off-screen interaction time. Or if you are in a situation where you're not comfortable actually seeing other kids face-to-face or having your children see other kids face-to-face. I know sometimes my daughter on some of the off days will actually have like FaceTime calls with their cousins who happen to go to the same school. And so they can do their homework together, but in a socially distant way, but still have the social interaction. And it's ironic that for us my husband and I don't really consider that screen time, even though it isn't, because it's an interactive social interaction. It's not sitting and watching YouTube videos or vegging out to Disney Plus and watching movies, for hours on end. And so there, I think, has to be tempering, definite, turn the screens off, go read a book, go outside and run around, go throw a ball and play in the backyard with the dog, something. There has to be some active off-screen time completely, and really have intentional conversations with your children. Have face-to-face conversations as much as you can to get them still used to talking to actual people instead of on a screen. But right now it's the reality of what we need to do, but I think we as parents need to temper the necessity of school and the necessity of having interactions with people that we're not going to be able to see face to face, with actually unplugging and having our kids be with people as much as we can.
Thank you so much for that, outlook, because you're looking at it from a parent's perspective as well as from a teacher's perspective. So you're covering both ends, Amy. And the next question is very relevant to what we just said, is parents asking, how can I encourage my child to remain physically active in this time when they have so much screen time? So I'll ask Dr. Bright to start with that one.
Hi, coming out from mute. Good evening, everyone. And that's a great question. And we know that there are so many benefits from exercise. Just getting out, expending that pent up energy can release stress. It can improve our focus and concentration. And I think the best way to do that is to model what we would like for them to see. So model behavior for our children, whether it's choosing an activity that you all can join in with. So that could be jumping jacks. And as the weather is opening up and getting nicer, getting out, taking a walk, and recognizing that can't be possible for everyone in different communities. But if you're in your home, and my friend always says any movement is good movement. So if it's dancing around the living room, it's really important not to overthink it and just get moving.
Absolutely. Dr. Morano, I'm sure you see in your practice that, keeping children active is so important for their physical and mental health alike. So what suggestions do you have?
I completely see the importance it is that our children try to get as much physical activity as they can. As Dr. Reeves Bright mentioned, during the winter time, it was much more challenging because we couldn't go outside. It was just cold out there. And even then, I always encourage just to walk around the block. So there's a change of scenery, a little bit of fresh air, you get in some physical activity. But I agree, you can just, do something in the home, dancing, doing a family quality time, something that's fun, something that's memorable. I think that's really important as well. Luckily now the weather's changing, outdoor time gives us the great opportunity to have that separation from the screen. And, as the mother of two teenage girls, I still have to encourage them to leave the phone at home. They don't need the phone to walk on a just around the block. So I recognize those challenges. The main thing is we want to encourage as much as we can, take advantage of the quality time that we have now with our families, and encourage the physical activity in any way that you can.
And Amy, do you incorporate brain breaks in your teaching so kids can actually get off the seat?
Oh my goodness, yes. So that's one of the things that we actually like doing. And now that the weather is nice, we'll take mask breaks. We'll go, the classroom I teach in has a door right to the outside. So we will actually leave the building, take masks off, be 6 feet apart outside, and take laps around, the big parking lot in the back of the school, so that we incorporate some social interaction, some actual conversation that's not necessarily content-based. It's, hey, you had a soccer game last night. I heard you had a great goal. That was fantastic. So that there's the opportunity for us as teachers to build relationships with our students while being physically active and giving their brains a break. Absolutely. And even when it's, during the winter time, we'll give the kids a brain break. That there's a rectangular hallway right outside my room, and we'll tell the kids, go take a lap, go take a brain break. Sometimes we'll give them a question to chew on or talk over with their classmates. And other times we say, no, just take a break, go take a lap, get a drink of water, come on back when you're ready. But it's important to do that coupled with physical activity. Absolutely.
That's great.
So important for the brain circulation and just to revive that thinking and brain activity, to get that break and be physically active and not have prolonged, durations of time where we're sedentary and sitting or standing. So thank you for doing that. That's I wish I was your student every time you speak, Amy. So that's I think most of us do. And our next question has to do with empowering our students to connect with others in this digital age, because we're seeing, especially during this pandemic, the shortness of social time and interactions with other children, which definitely kids of all ages are struggling with. So how do we, in this digital age, encourage our children to remain socially active and engaged? Dr. Moreno,
This for me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think the first thing we have to recognize as parents in any age of our children, developing friendships are really important, and that social aspect of their development. As a parent or a caregiver, we always want to serve, to provide some guidance and monitoring of those activities to make sure that our children are safe and successful in what their goals are. In terms of the importance of connecting, it really depends on your child's age. I always encourage FaceTime. I think is a great alternative now. It allows for that nice communication, whether it's with a friend or with family members. And I don't consider it as, digital screen time. It's actually a way to socialize. And as a parent and as a physician, I always tell patients and I tell my children, grab the phone and do a FaceTime call instead of texting, right? It allows for that social interaction, that connection that we unfortunately haven't had as we're used to. The other thing is we always want to serve as an example for our children. So our healthy interactions will serve as an example for them, and it'll show that this is really important for everyone. Even as a parent, we still also want to socialize. And the best way to do it, you do it the best you can. And I think right now, FaceTime is a great alternative. If you can, from outside your home and you have a neighbor and you can keep your 6 feet apart, you can still connect that way as well. So I think we definitely want to encourage that social interaction that keeps us healthy and keeps our children healthy. So I think that's really important.
I think you're on mute, Amani. Amani, you're on mute. Can hear you.
The famous statement in 2021, not just 2020. Thank you. How do we keep them socially engaged in spite of the distancing and the restrictions in this age?
Is that a question for me? I'm sorry, I missed the.
Yes,
the
to
opening.
continue
Okay,
to keep
yes.
them digitally, socially engaged and socially active. And
Right.
also a question that came through the chat, if you can make suggestions, how do we convince our teenage kids, especially when they're doing their virtual school, to actually put the phone away?
Yes. So I'll start. Obviously, as humans, we are wired for connection, and with the social distancing and all of the restrictions, we've really lost the ease to do that. And of course, over time, we can see that leads to increased anxiety and sense of isolation and loneliness, and sometimes even depression and other symptoms, more serious symptoms down the road. So all of the things that Dr. Moreno and Amy highlighted, I think are very important. I think for younger kids, parents may need to be intentional about scheduling that FaceTime call with a younger peer or a family member to make that connection, and also taking time for us as parents to connect with our kids. So I always joke with my kids, I like to have a captive audience, so I catch them in the car whenever we're driving somewhere. So I think, that's a time where I know that I can hopefully try to get them put their phones down at least and say, okay, for the next 10 minutes, let's have this time, let's chat, we can talk about whatever. And sometimes I don't get anything, and that's okay. But it may be that it's really important for them to know that we're interested, we're curious about what they're into, and what's happening in their lives, and that we're there to support them.
Staying connected is a healthy thing, but then having the right time for it. So Amy, I know I believe your students are teenagers, and how
Yes.
does the phone play out in your
Oh,
classroom?
the phones are
How
the
do you,
bane of my existence. No, I think they're the bane of every teacher's existence, because there's no way that, no matter what or how exciting I am or how engaging I am, I'm still not going to be as fun as Snapchat. And so that is the constant battle that teachers are fighting. One of the ways that I try, at least in my classroom, to try to build community, especially with students who are remote and students at home, now that I have students in person more days per week than I did before, I'm trying to do labs, which is a hit or miss depending on what we're trying to do that day. But what I've tried to do is at least have the lab materials for whoever's in the classroom, but I pair them up with a student who's at home and I put them in breakout rooms. And so there are lab groups in separate breakout rooms on a Google Meet, so that there's still some interaction and some community building and some conversation between the students who are in my room and then the students who are learning remotely from home, so that there's at least a little bit of connection. I wish I had an answer for the phone thing. I don't. I try to encourage students to just be present in my classroom. And if you are present in my classroom, then, if you're having a conversation with someone else on your phone, then you're not present in my classroom and you're going to miss part of the conversation. You're going to miss part of the richness of the learning. You're going to miss the context of what we're doing. And all of those things are important. And so, you kind of have to show up for your own life. And
use all the tricks you have.
Oh my God. But I also recognize too, I am not as exciting as Snapchat. And it's not something that is, with the way that our brains are wired for connection and the way that our brains are wired for instant gratification, having that, I've seen students visibly twitch if I have an extended, pre-COVID times when I'd have like a unit exam that would last most of a block and they knew that they couldn't have their phones out during the test. They will literally visibly twitch by the end of class going, I want my phone, I want my phone, I want my phone, knowing that they've gotten text messages and notifications and Snapchat messages to be able to check. And so that's where their brains are wired and that's where their social connections are. So depriving them of that is really difficult. So it's the battle that we fight because that's where teenagers live their lives. They live their lives online. They make their connections online. They communicate with their friends online. It's our job as parents and it's our job as teachers to encourage them to communicate in real life and to have conversations with people in front of them and not through a screen. But that's a constant battle. I wish I had answers, but I don't have.
But you do because you try
trying
to engage as best as you can. And
Absolutely.
you are a very engaging person to begin with. I mean, your backgrounds are enough excitement. In any meeting we have,
Right.
it's a different exciting background. So that I would just say that I'm sure your students.
So I keep trying. And it's a constant challenge. It's a constant, and what might work for one student or what a conversation might work for one student to convince them, yeah, I'm going to put my phone away and concentrate today. It might not work tomorrow for that student, or it might not work for the kid sitting next to them. So it really is an individual. I think a lot of it, at least for school, really comes down to relationships. The relationship that I have with my students as a teacher and as an educator and that conversation that I'm able to have with them, that personal connection when I say, this is for me, I want you to be present. You are important enough to me that I want you to learn this. That message sometimes is enough to get through to them, but some days it's not.
And frankly, a takeaway from Dr. Moreno, what she just said, and got me thinking, the role modeling piece that we do as adults. If I'm constantly interrupting my work and picking the phone and checking messages, I'm setting that's normal. That's how work is done. If I'm saying, okay, that's no phone time, I need to focus on this, I've set an example for my children to do the same. So us as role models is a very important piece of it. And we're seeing in the chat some parents saying, my teenager is able to watch TV, check her phone, do her class virtually, and still get the 90s. Well, that may work for one class, may not work for the other, and also what works for one child is not perfect for the other. So realizing our own challenges and our own abilities, how much multitasking is a lot, is important, and you may be able to pull off the 90 plus, but is it stressing your brain and your body? Are you adding stress to yourself trying to do so many things at the same time. Would you
I,
actually
I operate I operate on the harm reduction rule model. You know, you've got your iPad, the TV, your phone. Like, can we leave? Let's bring it to at least 2 screens, okay? From 3 to 2. Let's start there, and
I
then we
like
can
that.
whittle down.
Right. And because you may be able to pull it off, but what is it doing to your eyes
At
and
what
your
cost?
brain? So that's a conversation I believe is important for parents to have. It's not enough to see that you're having the results. In the long run, it's cumulative stress on your body.
Right. And it's hard to go from that to having a real conversation with someone because you're used to this constant bombarding of images and stimuli. So, you know, just thinking about to actually sit and have a face-to-face conversation, people start to tune out, you know, if you don't have the 3 screens and all the, you know, animation and such. So it's really good practice to really start to hone down some of that stimuli and especially as we're transitioning back and kids are back on site to really be able to adjust to, you know, getting back and having those face-to-face interactions.
We've also heard parents say it's hard for them to unwind at the end of the day and actually fall asleep because they've been so stimulated with all these screens, right? I mean, do you hear about complaints? Dr. Rano's nodding about, you know, sleep issues at a young age now.
And I think another important issue to consider, especially for our younger children, we want to encourage them to develop these social skills. So the more digital media that they have, the more challenging it is to make them feel comfortable in that setting. So I think as best as we can for the littler ones, you know, if we can minimize their exposure, especially if they're already getting a full day of remote, which is challenging enough, where they're have to, you know, concentrate and stay in front of a screen. It's very different from having the stimuli of playing a game or watching something on television. So I think for the younger children, there's different issues to consider for each age group. But for the littler ones where they really don't recognize or they haven't fully developed those social skills yet, recognizing the importance that that's going to play in their development.
And on that, to follow up with what you're saying, so how do we assure their mental well-being, you know, during that time that they are so stimulated on the screen all the time? If you can continue, Dr. Moreno, and then we're going to ask Dr. Reeves-Bright to also add on.
Who's the question for?
I'll repeat it again. So, so how do we assure students' mental well-being through virtual learning activities?
So I can pick up with that a bit. Dr. Moreno gave some great examples, but you know, I think we've got sort of a twofold here now because we've had that transition from, you know, the usual state of affairs when we're all in school and into online learning. So the aspect of not having the ability to have those social interactions kicks up anxiety for everyone. And, you know, we saw that very early on last year around this time when things transitioned so quickly and things we were in such an unknown times and unprecedented times. And I think we're now seeing as kids return to school, there is also the aspect of anxiety about going back to the face-to-face learning. And I think some children, it's very difficult. They may have lost the idea of how to have a conversation with someone, how to now raise your hand and participate in class versus, you know, raising your hand and doing it on a screen. So I think we have to think about that sort of anxiety that may creep in now, where the social anxiety piece is coming back as you now leaving your home from, you know, where you've been for the past several months and the comfort of that, usually with a parent at home and having to now go back into the classroom. And for some children, that can be really, really difficult. As parents, we really have to give them sort of a supportive push to say, you know, I know this is hard. I love you. I know you can do it. The best reward is actually getting in there to do it and see, I survived it. I did okay. I can conquer it. I can do it tomorrow as well. And I think that, you know, if we're there to support our children and let them know that, and be honest with them about, okay, I'm feeling a little anxious about this too. It's been hard for me to transition to work from home and being in this new environment with the new conditions. So they look to us to model how we will handle these situations. So it's important to have them, you know, help them have some really solid coping skills an outlet. We talked about the physical activity, the connecting with others, so that we can, get through these challenges together.
Great. And what about students who don't want to do their virtual learning? I'm going to go through the whole panel because this is an important piece. We really have imposed virtual learning on many students. But what if, a parent is finding that this is generating huge difficulty for their child? They don't want to do it. Amy, do you want to start?
Well, that's an part of that. I think that struggle is an age thing, especially younger children. Kindergartners and first graders are not wired to have online school. So this, I think, is a much harder transition for them to be on Zooms and on meetings and things like that. And I think that you have to be able to, as a parent, know your child's limits. And if a child misses a Zoom class, your child misses a Zoom class because their mental well-being is more important than kindergarten math class. As a teacher, I'm going to throw that out there. I've done the same for my daughter. I have had to email her teachers and say, she's not going to finish her math homework tonight because she's so stressed out that she's in tears. She's going to finish it tomorrow because this is what my child needs right now. And you as a parent need to be able to set those ground rules and know your child well enough to know when they're overwhelmed and when forcing them into this really not what should be. This is not what school is supposed to look like. This is not what we experienced as school. This is not the way that what is best for our kids. This is our stopgap measure in a pandemic to be able to provide some learning while there's all of this going on and to keep our kids safe. But this is not really the best way for them to learn. I think that really it has to be a conversation between you and your child. You have to understand where your child's mental state is. And you as a parent have the right to be able to say, my kid's not going to be online for class today because we need to go play at the park. Really, it's a mental health decision for you and your family. And that's okay. Those breaks, that's a brain break. Just like I give my kids brain breaks during class. Sometimes your kids need a brain break for a day, for a class, for an hour. It's not going to be the end of the world if they miss a class, not in, the pandemic conditions that we're in right now. And that's me as a teacher and me as a parent, being able to say both of those. So that's what I would say.
Forcing them when they've reached that breaking point is not a good idea.
Is completely counterproductive because your brain actually goes into such a state of stress that you physically can't learn. Your brain releases chemicals that prevent the formation of long-term memories. So what is it doing? It's actually completely counterproductive and really hurting your child's mental health to force them to be on it when they really can't do that. But that's where your relationship with your child comes in too, because you got to be able to figure out, is it they just don't want to right now, or is it they really can't right now? If it's just that they don't want to, then yes, you encourage them to say, yeah, I know you don't really want to, but let's see if we can kind of tough it out for today. But if you recognize that they're really at their breaking point, then you have the right as a parent to say, my child's at their breaking point. I'm not going to force them to do this right now.
Dr. Reeves-Bright, I know this is an important issue that a lot of parents are struggling with. When do you insist? When do you let go?
Right. No, I think Amy hit it right on the head. It's really important to have a partnership with your child's teacher, with the admin at school to let them know. I think I was on a panel before and they asked, is it okay for my child to skip school? Because they they burned out from the virtual learning. And as Amy said, I think we need that mental wellness time. So not necessarily skipping school, but letting the child's teacher know, this is what my child needs for today. And it sounds, as Amy hopefully speaking for all the teachers, that, it's okay to do that. And they recognize that's an important part of maintaining their mental health, because absolutely it's counterproductive to try to force them to sit and learn. And it leads to, they become upset with your parent and they're resentful. And, it really, it just compounds the issue. So.
Great. Dr. Moreno, it came up in conversation so far that, different ages, different criteria. So question is, at what point is screen time safe? At what age for children? And does it continue to be the same amount or does it increase with age? How do we monitor that?
It's a really good question. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually put out a policy statement on this a couple of years ago, and the age groups that screen time is definitely not advocated for is any child younger than 24 months of age. So at that age, we want to avoid any digital type of media. For children that are within that age bracket of 24 months, early toddler age, we recommend that they watch digital media with family members, and they learn from watching and talking with parents and caregivers and family members. So it's an interactive type of activity. When children are in preschool, a little bit beyond 2, maybe 2.5, 3 years old to about 5, it's recommended just 1 hour a day of high quality programming. And once again, we encourage the co-viewing with a parent or a caregiver. It just allows for more interaction and better understanding of what the digital device is all about. It was much easier than saying it now during since COVID has happened. So I think at this point, as we consider age groups, we still try to encourage that criteria for our younger children. As children get 5 to 6 years of age, I think we recognize once again that we have to set limits, and children appreciate that at any age. I think setting the limits really sets an example. And the other thing we want to encourage, and we have to recognize our children for this, is their ability and maturity to handle certain types of digital media. Every child is different. One child who's 9 years old may be very different from another child who's 9 years old. So in terms of recognizing how much screen time, what I say as a physician and as a parent is you want to limit the screen time, recognize that that shouldn't be their entire day of activity. At the same time, you want to recognize that, especially now that the alternatives are not as many, but we want to encourage, as we had said, as much as we can aside from the screen time. It can be challenging, especially for the older children. We want to recognize that this is actually something that can be unsafe for children. So as a parent, our role is also to recognize what they're doing without being intrusive, but recognizing that we're just looking out for their safety. One press of something on the web actually goes everywhere, right? And a child just needs to recognize the limit, I should say the unlimited information that they can send out and that they can receive as parents. We need to recognize that. So recognizing all of the pitfalls that digital media can have for children at any age. But as a parent, our role, once again, is to make sure that they're safe and that they feel comfortable and supportive in being able to communicate with their parents if there's any concerns that they may have.
So how about parents are wondering if games are interactive, does that count as social time? Are they better than just screen time that is not interactive? Is there a difference when games are interactive games, let's say, or a program is fun but educational, they're not just staring, they're actually participating. So how do you feel about that? Dr. Moreno, you want to start? Mm-hmm.
So the games, there's many different variety of games you can find on the web. For the smaller children, there are interactive games, and as a parent, you can actually watch them, and it's learning type of tools. As children get older and there's more games that they can be interactive with friends or even people that they don't know, and it's just their relationship literally is on the digital media device or whatever tool that they're on or platform, you still need to be aware, because this still is an opportunity that it can still be unsafe for a child, and you still want to limit that. The main thing with these interactive games, it does offer some type of social interaction if they know the person that they're playing with, but there's many scenarios that they're not aware of who else is on the other side of that other screen. So we want to recognize that as parents, when we think they're playing a game, just eyeball, what game are you playing? Once again, I think the key point is you want to let them know you're respecting their privacy, you're not being concerned. What are you doing? What's the game about? It can just be some conversation, and you can actually build and say, oh, how do I play this game? You know, some children will actually entertain that, and, you know, they'll enjoy having someone play with them. But like I had said earlier, we always have to be careful and just be aware and knowledgeable. And some of these interactive games are beneficial because they allow some interaction, and other times they don't. So there's a fine line to recognizing that.
And at a younger age, you can restrict who they're playing against, so it's someone known to you or them, as opposed to total
Exactly. There's
strangers.
privacy settings, right?
So the settings,
Right.
exactly,
You
that
can
would be
do a
important.
private setting versus public, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So Dr. Reeves, right? Parents are concerned, and we talked about the melting point or the breaking point. At which point should a parent really consider seeking mental health support for their child? What are warning signs and where they think or they should seek professional help? And that's an important question on so many minds these days.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's oftentimes the question where you ask, is it stress, or is this, is my child depressed, or is there something more serious going on? So I think that you're really taking a look at, really changes with your child. So they could be changes in their sleep patterns, whether they're sleeping too much or they're having trouble falling asleep, appetite changes. Oftentimes you can see the anxiety or more serious symptoms start to affect their physical health. So you might see more frequent stomach aches or headaches, school avoidance, again, not wanting to do that virtual learning. So I think it's important to, if you notice these signs, I encourage you to, even at the first step, reach out to your pediatrician. They can do an initial mental health assessment and let you know if there are things that should be followed up, and you should see a mental health professional. I also have to stress that if your child is already being treated or in treatment with a mental health professional, some children are being treated with medications for ADHD, depression. And this is a time where it's really important to make those regular follow-ups so that the doctor or the healthcare provider can really monitor any needed changes or potential side effects and things that come along with the medication course. So I think the first stop definitely should be your pediatrician, and they can direct you how to go from there.
Amy, that communication between the teacher and the parent is so important in identifying early identification of problems or stress or anxiety or depression or any of that. How do you handle that with parents?
So really, I noticed big changes. And so that's when there's a big change in behavior or a change in work completion. A student who was doing really well and was turning in lots of assignments stops. That's an immediate phone call home. It's contact home just to say, hey, I'm concerned. You okay? Is there anything I can do? What can I suggest? And sometimes the parents have said, yeah, we know that there's an issue. We don't know what to do about it. And so it becomes my job as the teacher to be able to hopefully connect them with our school mental health professionals. And so I will refer the parents and say, you can reach out to the student assistance counselors, the school counselors, to be able to give you some referrals if they're not already under a doctor's care for mental health concerns. So I call home all the time. Even if it's just a quick check-in, and sometimes the answer is nope, they've just been having a couple of rough days. Good, I'm glad I checked. Is there anything I can do to support them? But sometimes it's yes, there are big family things going on. My child is struggling. I need some help, and then I'm able to hopefully connect them to mental health professionals and people who are trained to be able to actually provide them the help that they need.
They could be dealing with someone ill at home, a death in the family.
And that has been happening a lot.
A parent losing their job. So much could really be influencing the signs that you're seeing, during their educational time. So that home to school constant connection is so important for that early detection. And
if parents are noticing changes, it may be something that you're noticing at home, but maybe is not happening in school. Reach out to your child's teacher, shoot them a quick email, say, hey, are you noticing X, Y, and Z in school? Here's what I'm noticing at home, for students who are in-person learning, or you know, even in a Zoom meeting, you know, are they engaging? Are they having conversations? Are they doing these things? So if you as a parent have concerns, reach out to your child's teacher, because they may be seeing things differently in class and different behaviors because they're with the teacher as an adult rather than you as the parent. We all know that our kids act way differently around other people than us, right? So there might be things that the teacher can pick up on that you may not at home, to be able to give you some additional clues there too.
So parents wonder, and I wondered, my kids are all grown up now, but I wondered every day, how much monitoring of my kids' online activity is too much monitoring? How much space do I need to give? Am I, you know, too strict, too hovering? It is really the ongoing question for a long time since the internet became such a household item. So how much monitoring do we need to do of their online activity, and how do we also maintain their safety in that digital world? Dr. Moreno?
That's a very challenging question, especially now. The most important thing to recognize, and I'll speak in terms of our times now, right? How do we know that we're doing the right thing for our children? And that's the goal. We want to make sure that they're healthy and that they're safe and that they'll prosper, right? That's our goal for them. And our concern is if they're on the screen too much, how much is this hampering that for them? One thing I always look at it is I say, make a list, make a little compassion list for yourself and say, okay, is my child acting differently? Are their sleeping habits different? Are they not eating because they're on the digital device? Are they not doing well in school? Are they less interested in school, or are they putting away their school responsibilities aside and they prefer digital media? If there's any of these warning signs, then your child most likely is needing some separation from that screen time. In this day and age, those I think are the key factors. And with that ties in the communication and just recognizing what they're doing. As parents, once again, I think even pre-COVID, setting limits are important. So for example, dinner time is a time where we separate our devices. If we're in the car together, let's spend this time together. This is the time we can capture each other's attention. Let's put away the devices. Setting those type of limits. And once again, children do appreciate it. They may not recognize it, but it actually helps them recognize that, okay, I can put this away for now. And it allows me to focus on something different. As parents, once again, in terms of noting what is enough, or are they on it too much? I think those warning signs are things you want to watch for, and letting your child know, okay, there's no reason why you can't just put that aside and let's dedicate Friday nights to watching a series on Netflix. This can be our pattern of spending some quality time. Yes, it's on a screen, but it's something together where they're not ingrained and all that stimuli, where you can actually enjoy something separate from any type of platform that they're on digital media. So I think as parents, the bottom line is, your child best, and recognize that, and just have open lines of communication. Just ask them, what are you doing? What do you like to do? Why don't you make a phone call? Why don't you FaceTime your friends? I think encouraging that line of communication is important as well. And lastly, I really appreciate from the teacher's perspective is recognizing if they're seeing anything different. If the teacher brings that to your attention, or if you have a concern that academically your child is just not where they were before, having that open discussion is really important.
And again, seeing from the notes in the chat, those who absolutely prefer the screen time and the virtual learning to the actual physical learning, and those who absolutely can't take it. And so every child is very different from the other. Same with socializing online. For some, it's anxiety inducing and stressful, and for some, this is where they blossom. So monitoring your own child. Dr. Reeves, right? Suggestions for digital safety and how much monitoring? Any more you'd like to add?
Yes, I mean, well, Dr. Moreno touched on those privacy settings and really taking advantage of any internet safety software that's available. I would just add, I think that, there needs to be a balance as kids grow older. The goal is for them to be able to graduate to fewer and fewer restrictions because we want them to be able to navigate the world of social media appropriately without there just being a firewall or a restriction, and because we won't always be there to do that as they get older. So I think having that conversation early on with them, what that looks like, what the dangers are that lie in social media, and recognizing, but this is also how they connect, and in some ways it's very helpful because it helps children explore, it helps them develop their sense of self. So that balance is going to be very important as they grow older.
A question that came in the chat, I think takes us off to the topic of the learning time to the homework time. And after they've had virtual learning, how do you even get them to do virtual homework? And if a child is really struggling with that, Dr. Reeves-Bright, and refusing to do homework or really struggling to continue, how do you motivate them? What works? Because parents are at the end of the rope.
And sometimes we have to start from scratch, right? So we look at this list of things that are motivators. And most times with my kids, I've gone through, and it, when they were younger, it could be, a Matchbox car. It could be that. So, depending on the age of your child, having a whole list of things that might be motivating, it's additional time with their friends, or they're able to drive the car, or have, depending on the age. So, everything won't work every time. So I think it's often important to, if you're providing some redirection or you're trying to get your child, to perform, to this homework, to couple it with a motivator. Sometimes for younger kids, if it's time to transition to doing homework. And
I was going to ask, are bribes and incentives allowed?
Incentives, yes, incentives. So I don't like the word bribes. It's a reward, it's a motivator, it's incentive. So, if your child's outside playing and it's time to transition to homework, you definitely want to give them, some time, a heads up that, in whatever number of minutes we're going to transition. But often say, it's Amy, it's time for dinner. You get to choose dessert tonight, and have them come in. So you're pairing, some sort of reward or something they might be interested in doing at the beginning of your request. So that's kind of the first thing they hear, and it's something they might be looking forward to. But I think it's, it's really, you have to be flexible. You have to give yourself some grace because every idea is not going to work in every situation. And then you kind of dissect it. What worked, what didn't work, what can I try next time? That sort of thing.
Amy, do you resort to
bribing my child? Yes, no, yes, I unashamedly, no, yes, I do. Every parent does. That's how you successfully parent. No, I'm kidding. One of the things that actually does work, though, there's something that I've done with my students as well, that it's called the Pomodoro technique, where you set a timer and you say, you're going to focus on this task. You're going to do your math homework. You're going to do your science homework. You're going to do whatever the task is for a certain number of time. And you set a timer. When the timer goes off, you get an X number of minutes of break. And so it's almost that brain break thing. But, your brain, if you're sitting down and you know that you have math homework, English homework, you have an essay, you have social studies, you have all of this, and you have this 3 hours worth of work, or what you think is going to take that long, your brain sort of shuts down and goes, I can't do all of that. But if you say, nope, you're only going to work for 20 minutes. So for high school kids, I do 20 minutes with my students. I'm going to set a timer. I have the timer right on the smart board in the front of the room, and it's a 20-minute timer. When the timer goes off, they get like a 3 or 4 minute break. And that's when we take our physical walk and our brain break. I've done the same thing with my daughter, especially on days when she has a lot of work to do. That's one of the things that we'll do. Okay, I'm going to set your timer. And then once your timer goes off, you can have 5 minutes to go play on, Apple Arcade, or play your whatever game. And you can play a video game, or you can go play Roblox, or you can do something else. But setting a timer so that you chunk the time and you chunk the tasks into, or you can help your child to organize the tasks. So if they have this mountain of homework, okay, what are the things that we can get done quickly? Let's knock those off of the to-do list, so that act of crossing off and successfully completing a small task actually gives you the stamina to be able to go and have the motivation to tackle some of the bigger ones. But chunking it time-wise actually works well too.
That's
Big
awesome.
fan of to-do lists.
Questions regarding internet safety continue, and we know that cyberbullying is an issue that parents are aware of and concerned about, as well as just some censorship on what sites they can actually get on. Do you have any recommendations related to protecting our children from cyberbullying, since they're on the screen so much and connected, whether through a game or just interacting, the FaceTime, the Snapchat? All these screens that they're on. Dr. Moreno?
So cyberbullying has definitely become a lot more prevalent, considering that our children are more on the screen. To recognize anything that may be going on, once again, it has to do with recognizing your child, and if anything is off in terms of just repeating what I had said before, some warning signs. So they have a disinterest in activities where they prior would revel in and really enjoy. Changes in their typical behaviors from sleeping, eating. You may notice that they're more hesitant to share their screen or what they're doing on the screen with you or anyone in the family. The thing with cyberbullying that you need to recognize is that it doesn't allow for separation, and many times if that device is always on and always on hand, you can't separate from it. And many times the person who's the offender um, is anonymous, and they don't know, and as a parent, you don't know what you're dealing with or who you're dealing with. So the first thing is just recognizing if there's something off with your child and having that conversation. Communication is key, and one thing I always let parents know is the first impulse is to take that device away, and that's not the necessarily the best thing to do, because then your child may consider it as a punishment and they think they've done something wrong. So you want to have those lines of communication, let them know it's not their fault, and then take the next step. If there's any discussions that have to be made in school, as appropriate, if there's any discussions maybe with the teacher, if they're recognizing this. And then if your child is having some more concerns that you think they may need counseling, definitely I would pursue that. And even as a parent, sometimes it's overwhelming for a parent. And if you need some counseling, by no means, should you feel that that is not appropriate, because it's a family endeavor, right? And then lastly, if there's any concern for any physical harm, then you would have to, go the right route and report this to the authorities or to the police. But cyberbullying is definitely a very real concept, and especially with all these different platforms that are out there. And one way that we can help lessen this is recognizing what platforms our children are on, which ones have privacy settings. And I think that's the first step. And nothing, there's no textbook that's going to give you 1, 2, and 3 of the right thing to do. But the main thing to help overcome this as a family is having those lines of communication open.
Really, would you allow a child to have a social media account, given the risks?
Right, that's very challenging. And I think, once again, you would have to think of your child's level of maturity. Many of these platforms are way beyond what they recognize, and there's so many dangers out there that they don't even recognize that. So having your child safely navigate around these different platforms is really important. And just eyeballing every once in a while, as parents, we can go on it ourselves. Just, you can see exactly what these platforms are all about, from Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, even these games. So you can get a firsthand knowledge of exactly what children are doing.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Reeves, right? With cyberbullying, unfortunately being, as common as it is, how do we limit our children's exposure, and then also what effects would it have?
Right. So I think, Dr. Marino touched on a number of ways to limit that. I would add that, when you're introducing your child to social media for the first time, that you're having the conversation with them about what's appropriate behavior looks like, in real life and in the online world, right? So letting them know that sometimes that images that they see or images that they post or send to friends can end up in the hands of someone that they did not expect or places they did not expect. So, really being cautious, having them to hopefully be cautious with what they're getting involved in and recognizing some of the dangers. Cyberbullying definitely can affect mental health in a number of ways. It can lead to, as we mentioned before, depression, anxiety, impact on the ability to make and maintain relationships, even now and in the future. So I think it's something that, when we talked about that connecting with your child and noticing those changes, that this is even a more important space to be able to do that, so that your child can come to you with those sensitive topics to talk about what might, what's wrong or what's going on, and they can confide in you.
I am loving the exchanges in our chat. I don't know if all the panelists are looking at all the sharing that people are doing of devices and programs to monitor your child's activity on social media. Loving all the links. And again, Amy, keeping up with the chat box. Thank you for that. And again, my trick is to copy the whole chat and put it in a Word file, and then you can have these links for future reference. That's what I do. And also, trying to cover some of these questions that are coming through, but the conversations are extremely helpful, and the feedback, parent to parent, is so valuable. We do want to keep our children active and keep them engaged, and unprecedented times where these physical closenesses are not as readily available or acceptable at times. How do we monitor that? And when we talked about screen time exposure even before COVID, and now more so it's almost a very tough pursuit for parents to limit screen time. So everyone, Amy had to leave us, and we are looking at your questions. Thanks, Amy, very much. She has a meeting with her, graduation meeting with her students. And I want to leave a little open floor for our panelists to actually say some remarks in case we didn't cover some important points on the topic of our children's screen time. Dr. Morana.
Thank you. I think the point that we've all learned here is that we have to give ourselves some grace in terms of recognizing all the challenges that are more prevalent now, especially with all of the digital devices that existed pre-COVID and is just more obvious as we're more in the home settings since COVID. We have to recognize the importance of just communicating with our children. At every age group, there's a different challenge with digital media, and there's a list of things that can be done, but you would have to fit this best into what works best for your family and what works best for your child. So nothing is necessarily the wrong or the 100% way of tackling this. And as I talk to patients, and I even deal with my children, this is new territory for many of us. And it's forced us as parents to really recognize what's out there in digital media at all ages. I have a 6-year-old and I have a 14-year-old. So the realm of what they're exposed to is very different. But it forces us to say, okay, what is out there? And lots of it is scary, but we want to make our children feel confident that they can navigate through these, right? And recognize the dangers that are there. I think that's important. You don't want to make them fearful, but you want to make them confident. So if you can teach them the right way and let them know that you're just there as support, but there will be limitations. They're still children and we're still your parents, and there will be limitations. It doesn't serve as a punishment. It just serves as a guide. And I think with those pointers in mind, it just will help us all get through this in the most positive way that we can.
And I think that's, ditto to everything that Dr. Marina just said. And I commend all the parents that are here, because as you mentioned, this is the first time we're dealing with these circumstances. So getting as much education as you can, talking to other parents, your teachers, and kind of putting a collective, brains together to know how to best help our children. And when there's a challenge, you reach out to someone else, utilize your village and your supports to, hopefully we're getting back to what will be the new normal, but hopefully less stressful times.
And just realizing again and again that every child is unique and is special in their own needs and abilities, what triggers them, what works for them, and every day is different as well. What works today may not work tomorrow.
Yes.
And just like constantly keeping, in touch with your child, and that communication piece that both of you brought up multiple times is so important, and just being very in tuned with any change, any difficulty, any frustration, and just like, handling each situation separately. We thank you so much. Your input is so valuable. Our children and families really appreciate the guidance, and we hope you come back to have another panel with us with New York State PTA, and thank all our attendees for spending some time with us tonight. And this webinar has been recorded and will be posted on New York State PTA's website under leadership with the rest of our webinars. And we also have the Fidelis Care New York spot on our Healthy New York. If you search Healthy New York, you will see it there as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Moreno and Dr. Reeves-Bright. We appreciate you being here this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.